Welcome to Decoding Coffee with Raja podcast.
Welcome to the deep dive. We're diving into leadership today.
Ooh, leadership.
Yeah. We're looking at Coffee with Raja. I don't know if you've heard of it.
I have actually. Yeah, it's a great blog for, anyone running a business or really anyone who's interested in leadership and growing a team.
Exactly. And we're looking at this great article called Are You Overlooking the Leaders on Your Team?
Uh-huh.
So really kind of turning the idea of leadership on its head.
Yeah, it really flips the script.
Yeah.
Because we tend to think about leadership in terms of the CEO or the manager, right?
Yeah.
Person with the title.
Right, exactly. Somebody in the corner office.
Exactly. But this article is saying that's not necessarily the whole picture. You can have people who are exhibiting leadership qualities even if they don't have that fancy title.
Right, and they're showing leadership through action.
Yeah, exactly. It's about, taking initiative, stepping up when there's a problem to be solved or, a grow to be reached.
Right, and it doesn't have to be, you're the head of marketing or anything like that. It could be in a smaller team.
Exactly. And the article actually starts with this really vivid scene.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah. Imagine you're in a bustling startup, right? Everyone's working hard. There's that electric energy in the air. Or maybe you're picturing a tech company with one of those open office layouts where, collaboration is kind of built into the design of the space.
Yeah, where everybody can see each other and it's very open.
Exactly. In these kinds of environments, leadership, it's not just about giving orders from the top down.
And it's much more organic, I think.
Exactly. It's about people stepping up, taking ownership, inspiring others through their actions.
Yeah.
And the article highlights this crazy statistic. I think it was from a Harvard Business Review study that found that 42% of employees take on tasks that are actually beyond their official job descriptions.
That's a lot of people.
It is. It's almost half of the workforce. So they're essentially stepping into these leadership roles, often without even realizing it.
That's interesting. So it's almost like they're leaders, but they don't even have that title.
Exactly. And that's kind of the point the article is making, that leadership can emerge organically from within a team. And to illustrate this, they introduce us to this case study with Maria, who's a senior developer, and David, who's her project manager.
Okay, so they're working together on something.
Yeah, they're working on this new software product, and this is where things get really interesting. Maria spots a flaw in David's plan, like a major flaw.
Oh, no.
Yeah, it could have been a disaster waiting to happen.
Is this going to sink the entire product?
Potentially, yeah. But now she could have just stayed quiet and let things play out, just do her job and not rock the boat.
Yeah, just keep her head down.
But instead, she does something really remarkable.
She speaks up.
She does. She steps up and she becomes the leader that the situation needs.
I like that.
Yeah, she gathers the team, she leads this brainstorming session, and together they come up with a solution that not only fixes the flaw, but actually improves the product.
So she turns a negative into a positive.
Exactly. And this is a perfect example of what the article calls informal leadership. It's emerging organically within the team. It's not coming from a place of authority or hierarchy. It's coming from a place of, expertise and passion and a desire to see the project succeed.
Right. She sees a problem, she fixes it.
Exactly. But here's where things get a little bit tricky. When it comes time to present the project to the higher-ups, David, the project manager, he essentially takes all the credit for Maria's work.
Oh, no, that's not good.
It's not. And unfortunately, the article points out that this is not an uncommon occurrence. A Gallup report found that only 30% of employees actually feel like they're fully recognized for their contributions.
That's so sad. It's like the majority of people are just, slogging away and nobody's giving them a pat on the back.
Exactly. And you can imagine how demoralizing that can be. It can lead to resentment, disengagement. People just stop putting in that extra effort because they feel like it doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's like, why bother?
Exactly. And that's where the article's definition of informal leaders comes in. They're the ones who step up and lead regardless of their title.
So Maria's a good example of this.
A perfect example. She didn't need a manager title to demonstrate those leadership qualities.
So what are some of the key characteristics of these informal leaders?
Well, the article points out that they're often the problem solvers,
Okay.
the motivators, the ones who can really influence team dynamics in a positive way.
Okay, so they're kind of like the glue that holds everything together.
Exactly. And the article makes a really strong case that recognizing these informal leaders is absolutely crucial for team success.
Okay, I can see why.
Yeah, because when you have people like Maria who are stepping up and taking initiative, it can have a huge impact on the team's performance and morale. Teams with strong informal leaders, they tend to be more productive, they have higher job satisfaction.
Right. So it's not just good for the company, it's good for the individuals on the team as well.
Exactly. But this brings up an interesting question. What about the managers? Where did they fit into all of this?
Yeah, that is interesting because if these other people are leading, how does that affect their role?
Right. And the article does acknowledge that managers, they're often under a lot of pressure to demonstrate their own leadership to their bosses.
Right. They have to prove that they're in charge.
Exactly. So it's this delicate balancing act.
Yeah.
How do you encourage and recognize the contributions of people like Maria while also, asserting your own authority as a manager?
That's a tough one. You don't want to step on anyone's toes, but you also have to make sure that the team is functioning effectively.
Exactly. And the article warns about the dangers of, leaning too far in one direction, particularly the danger of taking credit for other people's work, like what David did with Maria.
Right, because that can really damage morale and make people feel undervalued.
Exactly. And when people feel like their contributions aren't being recognized or appreciated, they're less likely to be engaged. They're less likely to put in that extra effort, and that can have a ripple effect on the whole team.
It's almost like you're punishing them for being good at their job.
In a way, yeah. And the article actually cites a Glassdoor survey that found that 53% of employees who quit their jobs cited feeling unappreciated as a major reason for leaving.
Wow, that's over half.
It is. So clearly, companies need to be paying attention to this. They need to create a culture where everyone feels seen and appreciated.
Yeah, it seems like recognizing these informal leaders is really good for the company's bottom line.
Absolutely. And the article offers some practical solutions for how companies can do this. Things like regular feedback sessions, peer recognition programs, open communication channels. It's about creating systems and structures that recognize and reward contributions at every level.
It can't just be like, once a year you get a little bonus or something. It has to be more ongoing.
Exactly. It has to be built into the culture of the company.
Right. And it has to be genuine.
Yeah, absolutely. It's about fostering an environment where everyone feels empowered to contribute their best ideas, knowing that their voices will be heard and valued. And to kind of illustrate this point, the article goes on to share some real-world examples of companies that have successfully implemented this approach.
Oh, that's great. I'd love to hear about those. What kind of companies are we talking about?
Well, one example is Google's Project Aristotle.
Oh, I've heard of that.
Yeah, it was this fascinating study where they tried to figure out what makes teams successful.
Right.
And one of the key findings was that the most successful teams often had these strong, informal leaders who were really good at facilitating communication and collaboration within the team.
So it wasn't necessarily the person with the manager title who was making the biggest impact.
Exactly. And they also talk about this global consulting firm that found that projects that were led by teams with active, informal leaders were 20% more likely to be completed on time and within budget.
Okay, so there's a real tangible benefit to this.
Absolutely. And I think these examples really highlight the power of recognizing and empowering these informal leaders. It's not just about feel-good vibes. It can actually make a real difference in terms of a company's success.
Right. It's not just about being nice. It's about making the company more effective.
Exactly. And speaking of effectiveness, the article also offers a glimpse into the author's own approach to this whole idea of informal leadership. Raja, he's the mind behind Coffee with Raja. He has a very specific way of identifying and empowering these individuals within teams.
Oh, that's interesting. So he's not just writing about it, he's actually putting it into practice.
Exactly. And one of the things he focuses on is spotting those team members who have the capability to lead but might not be naturally inclined to step up on their own.
So he's kind of like a leadership talent scout.
Exactly. He's looking for those hidden gems, and then he challenges them, he encourages them to take on more responsibility, and he provides opportunities for them to shine.
That's really cool. He does. He talks about leadership, business growth, and, just all sorts of interesting things.
Yeah.
It's a great way to kind of get a deeper understanding of his perspective.
That sounds really interesting. And I think I also heard he has a new book.
He does. It's called The Growth Matrix, and it's all about strategies for future-driven business growth.
Oh, wow. That sounds right up our alley.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. He talks about how organizations can embrace change, empower their employees, and really create a culture of innovation.
I'm definitely adding that to my reading list. It sounds like he's really passionate about creating workplaces that are both successful and fulfilling.
He is. And I think the Growth Matrix offers a really valuable roadmap for leaders who are looking to create that kind of environment.
It sounds like a must-read for anyone who's interested in leadership or business growth or just creating a more positive and impactful workplace.
I agree. We'll be sure to include a link to the book in the show notes for our listeners.
That's a great idea. This has been such an insightful conversation so far.
Yeah.
It's really made me rethink my own assumptions about leadership.
Me too. It's amazing to think about all the untapped potential that might be hiding in plain sight within our own teams.
Absolutely. It makes you wonder, are we overlooking potential leaders? And if so, what can we do to create an environment where they can thrive?
Those are great questions, and ones that I think we'll continue to explore as we delve deeper into Coffee with Raja in the next part of our deep dive.
I'm excited to keep learning.
Me too. But for now, let's take a quick break to refresh our coffee mugs and gather our thoughts. We'll be right back to continue this exploration of leadership and uncover even more insights from Coffee with Raja.
Welcome back to the deep dive. Before the mock, we were talking about how Raja identifies and empowers those informal leaders. And I think one of the big things that stuck out to me was that potential risk of pushing people too hard too fast.
Yeah, it's like you want to encourage people to step up and, take on those leadership roles.
Yeah.
But you also don't want to overwhelm them.
Exactly. You have to be mindful of their capacity and provide the right kind of support so they can actually thrive in those roles.
And it's interesting because I think everyone's different. Some people might be really eager to jump in and take on more responsibility, while others might need a little more time to kind of warm up to the idea.
That's a really great point. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach,
Yeah.
You can't just assume that everyone's going to react the same way to being given more responsibility.
Right. It's about understanding individual personalities and motivations and kind of tailoring your approach accordingly.
Exactly. And Raja talks about how important clear communication is in this process. If you're asking someone to step outside their comfort zone, they need to understand why and what's in it for them.
It's about building that trust
Yeah.
and making sure people feel like they're being given a genuine opportunity, not just being saddled with more work.
Right. It's about empowering them, not overwhelming them. And this actually ties into another potential pitfall that Raja highlights, which is the risk of perceived inequality.
Oh, yeah. That's a big one. If some team members feel like they're constantly being asked to go above and beyond while others are kind of coasting, it can create a lot of tension and resentment.
Absolutely. It's like, why am I always the one who has to do the extra work?
Yeah.
And that's where clear expectations and a fair distribution of responsibilities becomes so important.
Yeah. Everyone needs to feel like their contributions are valued and that they're all part of a team that's working together towards a common goal.
Exactly. And I think this is where that idea of recognizing and celebrating different types of contributions comes in. Not everyone needs to be a leader in the traditional sense, but everyone has something valuable to offer.
And when you create that kind of environment where everyone feels appreciated and respected, I think that's when you really start to see those informal leaders emerge.
Absolutely, because they feel safe to step up and share their ideas and take initiative. And then we have the last potential downside that Raja mentions, which is temporary disengagement.
What does he mean by that?
Well, think about those team members who maybe aren't naturally inclined to take the lead. When they're suddenly pushed outside of their comfort zone, it's understandable that they might kind of pull back or resist the change at first.
It's like being thrown in the deep end before you've learned how to swim.
Exactly. It can be a little bit overwhelming. But Raja's point is that this is usually just a temporary phase. Once they gain confidence and see the positive impact they can have, they're more likely to embrace those new challenges.
So it's about providing that support and encouragement during that initial transition period.
Exactly. It's about helping them to see their own potential and giving them the tools they need to succeed. And, even though Raja acknowledges these potential downsides, he's ultimately very optimistic about this approach to leadership. He believes that with careful planning and open communication, those negative side effects can be minimized.
So it's not a perfect system, but it's a system that can be really effective if it's managed thoughtfully.
Exactly. And I think it really speaks to this idea that we were talking about earlier, that leadership is not just about titles or positions. It's about mindset. It's about willingness to step up and make a difference. And that's something that can be cultivated in anyone.
It's something that can benefit everyone, both the individual and the organization as a whole.
Absolutely. So, with all this talk about informal leaders and empowering teams, I'm really curious to learn more about Raja's book.
Yeah, me too. Especially the growth matrix. I think that could be a really valuable resource for anyone who's looking to create a more dynamic and engaging work environment.
I agree. It sounds like it provides a really practical roadmap for putting all of these ideas into practice.
And, maybe it'll even inspire us to uncover some hidden leadership potential within our own teams.
I love that. It's like a treasure hunt for leadership.
Exactly. But before we go on that treasure hunt, I'm curious to hear your final reflections on this deep dive. What were some of your biggest takeaways? It really makes you realize that leadership is everywhere.
It really is. We tend to think of leadership as something that's, very formal and structured.
Right, somebody at the top.
But when you start to look for it, you can find examples of leadership in all sorts of unexpected places.
Right, like in our everyday interactions with colleagues and even, in our personal lives.
Exactly. It's about taking initiative, solving problems, inspiring others, and that can happen anywhere.
Right. It doesn't require a fancy title or a corner office.
Absolutely. And I think that's a really empowering message. Anyone can be a leader in their own way.
And I think when we start to recognize and celebrate those everyday acts of leadership, it can create a ripple effect that makes our teams and our organizations stronger.
Definitely. It's like we're all a part of this interconnected web of leadership, and we can all contribute to making it more positive and more effective.
And, speaking of positive and effective leadership, I think Raj's work really embodies that spirit.
Yeah, he walks the walk. His blog and his book, The Growth Matrix, they all offer really valuable insights and strategies for anyone who's looking to develop their own leadership skills or to create a more dynamic and empowering work environment.
And we'll be sure to include links to all of those resources in the show notes for our listeners.
That's a great idea, because I think the more we learn about leadership and the more we practice it in our own lives, the better off we'll all be.
Right. It's an ongoing journey of growth and development.
And it's a journey that I'm really excited to be on. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm curious, what are some of the key takeaways that you're going to be taking with you?
That's a great question. I think for me, the biggest takeaway is this idea that leadership is not about position or authority. It's about action and initiative. It's about stepping up and making a difference, even when you don't have to.
I love that. It's about taking ownership and being proactive.
Exactly. And I think it's also about recognizing and celebrating the leadership potential in others. We all have something unique to offer. And when we create a culture where everyone feels empowered to lead, that's when truly amazing things can happen.
Couldn't agree more. And as we close out this episode, I'd love to leave our listeners with a little challenge.
Ooh, I like challenges.
I think it'd be great for everyone to take a moment and think about their own teams and their own workplaces. Are there hidden leaders who are going unnoticed? Are there people who are already exhibiting those leadership qualities but maybe haven't been given the opportunity to really shine?
That's a great challenge. And I think it's something that we can all benefit from doing. It's about being more mindful and more intentional about recognizing and nurturing the leadership potential that exists all around us.
And who knows, maybe by doing that, we can create a more positive and more impactful world.
I love that. It's a great note to end on. So thank you so much for joining us on the deep dive, and we hope you'll tune in again next time for another deep dive into the world of leadership and business growth.
Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
It's been great having you. And to all our listeners out there, keep learning, keep growing, and keep leading.
Thank you for tuning in to the Decoding Coffee with Raja podcast. If you enjoyed the conversation, don't forget to like, follow, and share it with your friends. Let's keep brewing ideas together. Catch you soon.